what I try to help people learn is not how to be witty, but how to regulate themselves with humor. I ran upon a thinker, Anthony Gregoric, and he had these four thinking
Mhm.
styles: random, concrete, sequential, or abstract. And I found that I'm an abstract random speaker, which means it's easy for me to get off topic. All these things helped me to help others to say, humor isn't about tacking a joke on anything. It's not really about being the funniest person in the room. It's being able to regulate yourself and help others to co-regulate by building rapport.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am again your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I am joined by stand-up comedian, communication coach, motivational humorist, and writer, Bee Baumann. Bee, how you doing
I'm
today?
doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure having you. One of my favorite things in the world, and, this is true from other podcasts, is comedy. I love comedy. I love so many aspects of it, whether it's stand-up comedy TV shows, just being around a funny person. I just think comedy just brings so much cheer and energy to any situation. So I'm looking forward to kind of chatting with you and kind of getting your perspective on a lot of those things. So it's interesting because when I read your bio, obviously when you talk about communication coaches, it's a different angle. It's usually about eye contact, sending out a clear message. But your message is different because your message is basically, I'm sure, some of those components, but you have a very neat twist to it, and that is incorporating comedy or humor, I should say, not necessarily comedy, to become effective speaker, communicator, and so forth. So let's start with that. How did this all come about?
Well, I came to Germany in 2005 and worked as a business English trainer, but I always felt something was missing. So I decided to use humor with my clients initially, and then I found that I my story just evolved because I was kind of hiding in plain sight in Germany, not really wanting to do a lot. And then I joined Toastmasters here in Heidelberg and found my voice because I had to find my voice first. And I found
Sure.
my voice and wanted to provide a message to others about being confident because I struggle with an anxiety disorder. So that is in there too. And as I started giving talks, I found that when I used humor, it helped me regulate and be calmer and more confident and actually connect more with an audience. So that's when the bulb went off. That's when I got the aha moment and I started believing that what people need to do is become stand up communicators. And yeah,
Yeah.
and using the tools of stand up comedy because stand up comedians have to immediately build rapport with an audience, know how to craft a
Hmm.
message, and to be instantaneous speakers. So I found all the tools I needed in stand up comedy. People need to be confident communicators. So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, and I think with comedy, though, to me, there's very two distinct aspects of comedy, whether it's a stand-up comedian or maybe just a regular communicator. One is you have to have the mind to kind of come up with humorous content, and that'll be your traditional stand-up comedian who's kind of going to go up on a stage and spend 45 minutes or an hour telling stories, anecdotes, jokes, or whatever to a crowd. Then there's the people who either from a comedian standpoint do crowd work, or someone like you or me just in a room who, based upon a conversation, come back with something witty or funny, and so forth. So can you teach someone to be funny? And it's a two-part question because maybe you can teach someone to be a creative writer and a humorous writer, but you hear people say to someone in a room, "Oh my God, you're so funny!" Like, how do you think of something so fast to respond to something in such a funny way so quickly when you're not necessarily prepped for it? you're just responding to a spontaneous comment that maybe someone else made.
Yes and no, Mike, because
Okay.
what I try to help people learn is not how to be witty, but how to regulate themselves with humor. And I
Okay.
give people frameworks because I'm not
Mhm.
even a speaker who, you're right, there are people with that gift of gab. But one of the
Yeah.
things I try to do talking with businesses and in my talks is bring people back to the original meaning of humor, which were the four humors to regulate the body, caloric, sanguine, black, and green, I believe. And it was about body regulation, the humors. And
Mhm.
then slowly the topic evolved of humor into being able to regulate the body. And it's just the last 100 years that it's been about being able to slap a joke on everything. And so I try to bring
Yeah.
people back to the regulating yourself so you can be confident and you can speak and you have frameworks to help you speak spontaneously, because that was something else I had trouble with. I ran upon a thinker, Anthony Gregoric, and he had these four thinking
Mhm.
styles, and it's random or concrete, sequential, or random, concrete, sequential, or abstract. And I found that I'm an abstract random speaker, which means it's easy for me to get off topic. But
Right.
but all these things helped me to help others to say humor isn't about tacking a joke on anything. It's not really about being the funniest person in the room. It's being able to regulate yourself and help others to co-regulate by building rapport.
Mhm. Right. And I think there's a few aspects of humor too that probably go along to your point. Is humor can come in many forms. Humor can be in the form of making fun of yourself, joking about others, or just joking about something, whether it's a situation, whether it's, and so forth. When we're talking here about communicating, obviously humor can be an aspect where it is easy for people, depending on the humor or the joke, whatever word you want to use, to take offense. Because sometimes what you think's funny could be offensive to someone else, whether it's politically driven, racially driven, sexually driven, whatever it may be. So, what's the balance there as you're teaching people to know when you're towing that line between safe and perhaps a little risky?
Mhm. That's a great question. And humor is a double edged sword, and it's filled with
Mhm.
ambiguity. And it is, I say, humor is used to rebel, it's an open rebellion. So when we speak to others and we hope to make that connection, one thing what we can do is to stay in context. Because if
Right.
you're staying in the context of what's happening at that moment, you should be uh, on pretty safe ground as you're trying to build rapport with someone. When you think about, will this joke land, something you can always do is ask permission. Can I tell you something I think is funny? You know, that's okay, because then you set up the funny frame, and you get
Mhm.
that permission. That's something else you can do. And the third thing you can do is, like you said, keep it about yourself, or keep it about positivity, about trying to create rapport and not negativity, any negative
Right.
ideas.
And I think it also depends on, like you said, where you are. Meaning, I'm going to a comedy show. I need to know that if I'm going to a comedy show, I'm fair game for that guy up there. I'm choosing to go into an environment where potentially I could get picked on. As opposed to if I'm going to a work event or something else that isn't a comedy show, I should be able to go there and feel pretty good that if I just want to sit back and observe and not become part of the show or part of a joke, that I don't have to worry about that.
Oh, you are so right. A comedy show is like the wild, wild west. Anything can happen
Right.
in a comedy show. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's important. So when you're dealing with people and as a communication coach, who are the what type of clientele are you dealing with? Are you dealing a lot with just everyday people who want to communicate better one on one or in small group settings? Or are you talking to people that are more presenters or lecturers and are really getting in front of a crowd?
Mhm. I speak to people who are scientists and they have a message that they want to share and find it hard to make it accessible to people, educators, leaders, entrepreneurs, people who have to present or speak in front of people and want to be more confident and more accessible.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. And I think people also need to approach different scenarios differently, meaning a public speaker speaks in front of 500 probably has to have a different approach when it's a group of 10 versus just having a conversation at a dinner with a bunch of people. I think your mindset has to change and you can't go into every engagement, with that same thing. Now, if you're speaking in front of a large group, you're obviously going there with a purpose. Meaning you don't end up on a stage in front of people for no reason. So you're there to give a speech on a particular topic. And in theory, you're an expert in that area, or else why would you be, doing that? So when you talked about confidence, I'm going to put in a different word there, credibility. So when you're getting on stage to speak in front of an audience, you're coming with a certain level of credibility that you're going to inform or educate them on whatever you're talking about. Does that kind of give you a little more leeway because you, in theory, know something that they want to learn about? So they're a little. Do you feel the audience is a little more open to whatever presentation style you might have?
Yes, credibility is one of the pillars of communication, public communication, and it is a strong pillar. And you're right. People, if a crowd comes to hear you speak, they are already giving you that power over them as you stand on the stage prepared to speak. So credibility, yes, is a strong leg to stand on. And you once you build that rapport, once you start that talk, you're right, you could have any style. You people, however, need to be confident that, one, like you said, that you have something to share, that you can share it, and that they're safe with you. So once those hurdles are crossed, then yes, you're right, the audience is pretty open and willing because they came to hear you speak.
So it's interesting. So some of your TEDx talks, embracing humor, kind of explores how you learn through conflict, but more importantly, using laughter as a way to kind of understand and maybe diffuse a situation. Can you talk about that? Because I agree with you. I think humor sometimes, not sometimes, I think humor most of the time can be a great tool to defuse or lower the temperature in a room.
Exactly. Humor does just that. And like I said, if we go back to the original definition of humor, it is regulation and co regulation. So for yourself, it's not about telling that quick joke, it's about being present and being open to the situation being ambiguous, being open to more than one reading or perception that could be between you and the person you're speaking to, the stakes being high and being able to take a different view of that. So that's what it is about with conflict management. I believe it's about being able to regulate yourself so that you're open to your creativity, to the possibility that the situation has more than one reading that's what comedy and
Mhm.
humor is all about, is that anything can have more than one reading. And so being open to that puts you in a place where you're more likely to help the other person de-escalate and build trust
Yeah.
that you can come to a conclusion together.
Yeah. So I know you've now written and produced two one women stand up comedy
Mhm.
shows, and I know you've written some books and so forth. But I like what your message is because I think you said, and I'm actually reading this, so I know you said it, that your mission, regardless of the method that you're delivering a message, that your mission's the same. And I love this line: it's turning setbacks into punchlines that uplift and empower. So let's just pretend you're doing a stand up right now. I'm not going to put you on the spot to do an act, but kind of give me an example of a setback that at the time was bad, but how you've turned it into, I don't want to say a joke, but into a humorous anecdote.
Mm. Well, I come from a background where I come from a poor family, a family of eight. And as I said before, I have an anxiety disorder. And I speak about these things in my book, Girl, You Ain't Crazy.
Mhm.
You know, it's a motivational book to help other women as well who, like me, maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, doesn't matter, who
Sure.
come from a generation that thought we were supposed to stay at home, you know, who bought into the fairy tale. And so I laugh a lot about myself like that. Like, you know, when I was coming up, Cinderella was not a gold digger. You know, she was
Yeah.
aspirational. That's what
Yeah.
we wanted to do.
Sure.
And so that message of redefining yourself, and I like to say that I found that my superpower is empowering others. And so that's what I
Which
try
is
to
great.
do with my comedy. And my comedy is a lot about fish out of water, about just trying to own your own space and be confident and okay with yourself, no matter what, where you're at, wherever you're at, that's where you're supposed to be, and then you move from there to do better, to
Right.
build whatever you have to.
Yeah. And basically one of your books, and I'm saying this only because I see the name. When you're talking about being a fish out of water, you're an American black woman who relocated across the world to Germany. So when you're talking about a classic example of someone being a fish out of water, you basically already given the setting to whatever kind of act. And the book I know you're working on, A Year in Strudelbach, A Black Woman's Guide to German Village Life, which actually just the title itself sounds funny because yes, that's kind of right off the bat you can think about, okay, there's some humor and some humorous tales and how you transition to that new life.
Exactly. And I say a lot in my talks, in the books, that I came to Germany. I married a wonderful man, but I came to retire. Like my whole thing was to try to retire from life because of the
Mhm.
anxiety disorder. And I found myself in this little village, you know, hiding in plain sight. And so,
Sure.
like you said, being a visible minority. And
Yeah.
through that, I found the only self-defense I had was laughter, was, and then that
Mhm.
carried me on stage, and then I wanted to be a motivational humorist for other women and people
Yeah.
of color. So
Yeah.
you're right. That's exactly where my humor comes from, is this the ability to just adapt, and how that
Mhm.
happens for all of us.
Yeah. It's obviously, I don't want to say later in life, but not the first part of your life. So for you to go from whatever you were doing earlier on to now having humor and laughter and stand up and, humorous writing be such a part of your life, clearly you had to always be a fan of comedy and humor and maybe comedians. So growing up, were you into that? And if so, who were some of the comedians even then or even now that you really enjoyed listening to?
Well, yes, I loved humor, and humor for us in my neighborhood was kind of dark. We did the what we called the dozens, a lot of your mama jokes. There was Spike Lee,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and yeah, and there was this rhythm about it, and it was with poetry, really. Um, Stagger Lee, I remember those jokes, and on television there was Good Times,
Hmm.
and Sanford and Sons, and so I liked all of those early sitcoms. But I also liked the
Yeah,
Carol Burnett show, the Lawrence Welk show. I've always
sure.
had a sort of a mixture of things that have had an impact on me. If some of my favorite comedians are Betty White. Like I loved Betty White. I um,
Hmm.
Amber Guffin. I think Ruffin. I adore her,
Hmm.
but also Leslie Brown. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, I tend to be someone who has an eclectic taste for
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, I'm a huge Barbara Streisand fan.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little different than the first two you
Yeah.
you mentioned. Let me go back to the comedy shows because there's one show from that same time period that you didn't mention, and I want to mention it because the humor from that show probably wouldn't survive on TV today, and that's All in the Family. Uh, and obviously, All in the Family, had a large racial,
Hmm.
theme, and necessarily not a positive theme because you had obviously a racist person living with a very non-racist family who had friends of different ethnicities and so forth. Is that a show you watched? And if you did, how did you respond to that kind of humor when you were watching it 40 years ago or 30 years ago?
Well, even back then, I knew that Archie was a caricature of that type
Right.
of person. So it was good to
Mhm.
see him on TV. It was good to see people play off him and try to, talk about conflict management, to try to understand him and still bring him towards the light with them. So that was a strong show about, for me, about tolerance. Even though Archie wasn't very tolerant, but he became so, and he learned, and he built on himself as well.
And then in reverse, you had a spin-off from that show, The Jeffersons, which was really the same kind of racism in
Yep.
reverse. Now you had a black man who really, black family, uh, the best friend was a white man with a black wife and so forth. And it was now in reverse how he now didn't like white people, but his family all embraced white people. So never really thought about it till right now. It's amazing how that spinoff, which was also very successful, was really the same show with kind of the same message, but in reverse.
Exactly. And I think those shows worked back then
Right.
because we knew it was that those type of people existed. It wasn't that they did not
Mhm.
exist, but that
Right.
was a caricature. So that show, the show told
Mhm.
us that this is a character of these types of people, which helped us to deal with our emotions and our feelings about what they were saying and doing
Right.
in a play frame. And that's what you need. You need a play frame. And but you're right. Now a lot of times people want to sort of destroy the idea of a play frame, and say no, everything is, somehow, like you, in my talk, embracing humor, there's people who feel like somehow we can make all language safe, and that we can build a glass house for all of us to live in. And I believe that's very dangerous. So I am in the
Yeah.
camp where I want to hear it. I want to hear everything that people have to say in a frame, in a safe space.
Well, you just said it perfectly because if you just think about it, and some of the comedians that I listen to now, they'll make jokes about people of color. They'll make Jewish jokes. I'm a Jewish, whatever. And they're funny. And they're funny even if they're directed at my people. Maybe you laugh at them if they're directed at someone, like yourself. but it's okay there because, again, back to my point before, that's what you're expecting there.
Exactly.
I'm not expecting when I go somewhere else, not even to my point before where I don't want to get picked on. I also don't want to be offended by what I'm hearing if I'm going to hear a speaker talk about engineering. There should be nothing that he says that offends me as a whatever I am. Uh, do you think, though, or why do you think, since it's obviously clear that societal views or norms or whatever, as they change, certain types of comedy become okay and not okay? Because this has been a debate. This isn't me coming up with this. I've heard this before. Would All in the Family A be allowed on network TV? I mean, now with all these other platforms, it would be allowed somewhere. But would All in the Family A be allowed on network TV? And if it was, how would it be responded to?
Mm. Oh, that's a great question. I think there would always be a lot of messaging around it to
Mhm.
make people feel safe. These messages.
Yeah.
Nothing in this is we don't believe any of these things. We're just putting them out there in front of you,
Right.
kind of disclaimers. So definitely it
Yeah.
would have disclaimers, and maybe
Yeah.
not be able to pick up the kind of endorsements or
That's where I
yeah.
was going with that. Would someone endorse a show that the lead character is racist?
Right, yes, exactly. Because of course, then it's like it comes back to you. And I agree that times have changed and you're walking on eggshells with everything you say. And even
Correct.
in a
Yeah.
even in a play frame, people will pick everything you say, will pick it apart and look for that thing that they feel is unacceptable. And ah, and that's why for me, my message that we need humor for regulation, that
Mhm.
we need that ability to use comedy as a communication valve, as a pressure valve. We really can't lose it because we don't have too much
Right.
else. So yeah, so my message is always lighten up. And yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Um, you have to filter the jokes through you. Like I can, I'm married to a German man, so I feel like I can talk about German culture, but you do have to have some aspect of that culture, a girlfriend, I don't know, you're living there, something that helps people to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
where you're coming from, see what your premise and your
Right.
perspective is.
And I think also, if you're going to deliver jokes, you have to be willing to be the joke. And you have to open yourself up to whatever it is, whether it's something about you physically. In your situation, maybe it's your anxiety, and you have to identify, in my opinion, at least, a flaw. And I think if you can make fun of yourself right off the bat, I think to me it also presents, okay, this guy's, he's willing to make fun of himself. So anything he's doing is not looking to be mean spirited because he might make a joke about me, but he just made a joke about himself.
Exactly. And it can even be that person who comes on and is arrogant or
Mhm.
has some other fatal flaw that they in that characterization, in that character, they can't see. But you sitting in the audience can laugh at the stupidity of their arrogance, even, or
Yes.
thinking that they're intelligent. So that too is humorous when someone can create a character that makes us laugh, like a Archie Bunker, or.
Sure. So we only have a few minutes left, but do you still watch American TV today? Like, over there, are you watching any kind of shows from the current day?
No, no, I don't watch a lot of TV. If I do watch something that I want to sort of digest, it's Kim um like Chinese soap operas, something silly
Yeah,
from
yeah, sure.
YouTube. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious with today's comedians and today's comedies on TV, if there's something that you found to be very, either witty or really, cutting edge kind of thing. Because there's obviously so many different things coming out. So you being what I'll call a a humor specialist, for lack of a better word, if there's something out there today that you really admire.
Yeah, well, I admire everyone that's trying something new, everyone who's being experiential. And there's some channels like Dry Bar, even though it's Dry Bar is, no blue comedy, no black comedy, sort of
Yeah.
no profanity and that kind of thing, sexual innuendo and all of that. And
Yeah.
I think that
Straight humor, no looking to offend nobody
exactly.
kind
I
of thing.
find that cool. And on the other
Yeah.
hand, there's 800-Pound Gorilla, which is a YouTube channel that does comedy and has comedians. And so I'm open to new comedians, and everybody's out there. And like name wise, I just sort of look at everybody sort of as a stew, and I take from them sort of what they're doing. So there's a really funny comedian who has, yeah, well, I have Alzheimer's, but she has muscular dystrophy, and she is so funny, and she brings that to stage. And I see so many different comedians brings aspects of themselves that have never been on stage before on stage. And so I really embrace that, and that's what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
is people who are pushing sort of at the edges. I love the people who can do crowd work and just really riff off of it.
Yes, that to me is the most entertaining to watch. Not someone who prepares a skit, but someone who could just, come up with things, in that interaction. And to me, not that I find it funnier, I just find it so much more impressive that someone could be funny. Because to me, that's when you're naturally funny. Delivering a comedy act is funny, but I don't know. You had all this time to work on it. You had a chance to test it out with audiences. Maybe someone else helped you write it. But to me, when you're up there with the spotlight on you and you could be funny and make me laugh and make me cry from laughter because of something you just thought of, I mean, to me, that's the brilliance of comedy right there.
Yeah, that's a brilliant aspect of comedy, and there's many
Yeah.
aspects to comedy.
Oh, of course. So again, just to kind of summarize everything, you're a self-published book, Girl, Gurrl, You Ain't
Yeah.
Crazy. You're right now looking for an agent for a year in Strudelback, as I mentioned before. You're writing a stand-up comedy, which I can't say the name of for obvious reasons, but I can work around a certain word when shutting up isn't a blank option, which sounds very funny. And you're currently, you've written and produced 2 one-women stand-up comedy shows in Germany, which is awesome. How can people find you across the world on like social media and etc.?
Linktree, I think it's TR/EE Bee Baumann. So I'm on Linktree. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and Instagram, Bee Communications with an S. My
Right,
company.
so BEE Communications on
Mhm.
Instagram. You have a website, Bee Baumann, which is
Yeah,
www.beebaumann.com.
that's it.
So people can find you there and check you out on those 2 sources.
Thank
Well, listen, real interesting stuff. I do love talking to people across the world. I always find that fascinating that we're here looking at each other, having a conversation, and you're several thousand miles away. So I appreciate you. For me, it's in the morning, but for you, ending your day talking to us. And I wish you good luck with the book and your comedy show.
Thanks so much, Mike. You guys have a great one.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.